If there is one trend that has dominated the new custom, semi-custom, and premium keyboards in general in the last few years, has been the reduction in their size. While full-size keyboards with over 100 keys were perceived as the norm since the birth of the personal computer, as software user interfaces evolved and relied more and more on pointing devices, and more recently even on touch screens, the need for multiple function and navigation keys dwindled to a point where many traditional keys on a full-size board are barely used or even barely understood by newer generations of computer users. Besides, as first-person shooter games became more and more popular in the last couple of decades, so did smaller gaming keyboards that promised to give you more space for your wide mouse movements. As a result, it is only natural that as the new mechanical keyboards renaissance of the last few years came along, it focused almost entirely on small form factor keyboards, such as 60, 65, and 75% layouts, since many of these keyboards hobbyists were also younger gamers who simply did not have the need, nor the space, for old-school battleship keyboards on their desks. So today we'll take a look on the first of a few interesting takes on the 75% layout that I have been testing for the last year, the wireless and fully aluminum cast version of the Epomaker AK84S. This is a production keyboard that Epomaker keeps in stock, comes fully assembled with your choice of switches and keycaps, offers Bluetooth connectivity, and promises to deliver a premium typing experience without taking too much of your desk's real estate. As usual, we'll test it in its stock configuration, and then we'll make a few popular mods to see if we can fix some of its shortcomings. So, buckle up and enjoy the ride on this heavy but compact and wireless offer from Epomaker.
This video is sponsored by PCBWay. Bring your DIY projects to life with PCBWay's printed circuit boards, prototyping, manufacturing, and assembly, as well as their CNC machining and 3D printing services. Get PCBs for as low as $5 per unit on PCBWay.com. Check the link in the description below for more information.
Hello and welcome to IOSam. I am Sam Franco, and this is a channel where I do tech reviews and show you how to build, fix, and mod all sorts of computer gear. Today we are reviewing the Epomaker AK84S. And while this is not one of the latest models by Epomaker, it is still one of their most premium offers in 2022. After using a 100% retail version of this keyboard for over 2 months now, I think I got enough usage out of it to conclude if it is worth its $200 price tag. As regular viewers of this channel already know, I always break my videos into well laid out chapters with progress bars on the bottom and top of the screen to help you navigate my long-form videos in case you need to jump to any specific chapter. As the required disclaimer for this video, Epomaker sent me this review unit a few months back, free of any charge for the sole purpose of this video review. But hopefully at this point, you already know that the scripts, views, and opinions in my videos are always 100% mine, with no inputs or influence from manufacturers, resellers, or PR teams. While I do not have any affiliation with Epomaker while publishing this video, I will leave a link to this specific model on their website for your convenience as usual. But I will place affiliate links for some of the other products and tools I'll show here, and if you buy anything out of those links, I might get a small commission without any additional cost to you. But that does not and will never affect the context nor the content of my videos. The AK84S is manufactured by Skylung, the same company behind the ultra-popular GK and SK line of mechanical keyboards. But this one seems to be designed exclusively for Epomaker under their own specifications. This keyboard is the result of a successful Kickstarter campaign launched in March of 2020 and which started shipping in the second half of 2021. While they had a large variety of case materials, both optical and mechanical switches of different tactilities and weights, and keycaps profiles and materials, I'll focus on the top-of-the-line version as provided to me by Epomaker. Although many of the characteristics of this version will also apply to the cheaper ones, such as layout, RGB lighting, and both hardware and software controls. This is a small form factor aluminum encased keyboard in this particular configuration that comes fully assembled with FR4 plate, your choice of Gateron switches, and thick PBT keycaps. It can be used both wired with USB-C and wireless through Bluetooth 5.1, but no 2.4 GHz dongle though. It comes with a very generous 5 volts, 4000 mAh battery that should last you days of use if you go easy on the RGB lights. Its 75% layout is of the more traditional compact type, meaning you have no separation between the clusters of function and navigation keys. Which means you keep almost all the same keys you'd get on a TKL, but on an area that is just one column wider and taller than popular 60% boards. It has a hybrid mounting system that uses usual tray mounting screw posts on the bottom of the case that go through holes on the PCB and attach directly to the FR4 plate. This means this keyboard, while much stiffer than a top or gasket-mounted keyboard, offers some interesting modding possibilities for sound and plate flex that we'll explore later on in the video. It has north-facing 5-pin hot-swappable MX-style switch sockets to allow you to use any MX-style switches in it, as you'd expect from a keyboard in this segment at this point. It has per-key RGB illumination that you can control exclusively through the standard GK6X Plus driver, but it does come with a few hardwired light animation schemes if you don't want to mess around with the software, which is always a good thing. It also comes with 3 standard layouts pre-programmed, 2 for Windows and 1 for Mac. Yes, this keyboard is 100% compatible with macOS, both in wired and wireless modes, and even comes with macOS keycaps you can exchange with the Windows ones, which is extremely appreciated and something I wish more companies would do. In fact, I get the vibe this keyboard was almost designed with macOS users in mind, from the way the secondary functions are laid out to the sandblasted aluminum aesthetics of the case that makes it pair beautifully with MacBooks and iMacs. The AK84S is an inventory item through Epomaker's own website, and it can vary widely in price, from $109 for the hybrid aluminum and plastic case version, all the way to $199 for the translucent acrylic and the full aluminum version I have here. The keyboard comes with the usual assortment of keycaps and switches puller, extra switches, USB-C cable, the aforementioned extra keycaps, and an instruction card. It has a 1-year limited warranty, which is also a nice benefit of going with a production keyboard.
If you're watching this channel, there's a good chance you're into building, modding, and DIYing your way through electronics, right? So, do yourself a favor and check out PCBWay's multitude of services such as PCB prototyping, manufacturing, and assembly, as well as their CNC machining and 3D printing services. PCBWay offers you a wide variety of custom options for your project, as well as some of the most sophisticated PCB manufacturing options in the market, such as multi-layer, flexible and rigid flex boards, high-density HDI, thick GEMs, and SMD stenciling, all built with the highest quality materials sourced from the most trusted suppliers in the industry. Oh, and don't forget their awesome injection molding, CNC machining, sheet metal working, and 3D printing services, such as these beautiful keyboard plates I designed and ordered with them, and which will be featured in my upcoming series of Alps-based custom keyboard projects here in the channel soon. Check out the video description below for more information and for $5 off your first order with PCBWay.com. And huge thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video.
And a quick note about Epomaker. Outside of their Kickstarter fame, not much is actually known about them, other than the fact that they seem to be more of an e-commerce platform where some of the largest Chinese keyboard manufacturers sell their premium boards. And I'm talking about some fairly well-known names such as Ajaz, Pro, Acco, Magic Force, Niz, and Epomaker/Skylong themselves. Besides their own website, Epomaker also operates through Amazon and AliExpress, although it seems that some of their most premium products can only be found directly on their own website and shipped from China. Besides production keyboards, they also sell keyboard kits and all sorts of other keyboard-related parts, such as cables, keycaps, wrist rests, and switches from big names such as Gateron, Cherry, Kale, and TTC, among others. The AK84S is offered in 3 versions. The first is the basic configuration for $109, which has an aluminum frame with plastic bottom. Comes with PBT keycaps on Epomaker's own GK1 profile, which kind of reminds me of the CAT profile, and your choice of mechanical or optical Gateron switches, as well as Epomaker's own chocolate mechanical switches, which they claim to be smoother and more durable than regular MX-style switches. The other 2 options are the thick translucent acrylic and the full aluminum versions for $199. Those come with the same options of switches and keycaps as the basic configuration. Epomaker also offers their exclusive silicone GK2 keycap set for an additional $65. This set is different from anything I have ever tried so far. The profile is taller than their GK1, something more akin to SA or MT3 profiles. But the star of the show here is the material used, soft silicone, which gives a nice rubbery texture to the keys, and that can drastically change the sound of the keyboard, as we'll see later, since silicone is also a powerful sound damper. I know that the texture and sound coming out of these caps might not be for everyone, but they definitely have their advantages. For one, they're not slippery, so your fingers will always have a good grip on the key surface, which might help making less typing mistakes. And the other is the lower pitch and lower volume sound, which might be an advantage if you want to tone down the noise from your keyboard a bit. I say they look really cool as well, so that's a bonus. In the box, you get the keyboard wrapped in plastic, but with no dust cover. For a dust cover, I grabbed an acrylic one for 75% keyboards from KBD Fans for $16, and it fits this keyboard perfectly. You also get a super stiff braided USB-C cable, your usual assortment of crappy keycaps and switch pullers, the aforementioned 3 macOS keycaps, and an instruction card that you should definitely keep around, since it has very important instructions about how to switch layers and change lighting schemes without the software. The 75% layout of the AK84S is of the traditional style, with no separation between function and navigation keys, which brings the advantage of being compact for those who like small keyboards that take less space in your desk, and the disadvantage of being too cramped and difficult to find certain keys without looking down at the board. But the main selling point of this layout is having almost all the same keys from the TKL layout on a much smaller footprint, including, of course, the arrow keys, which are missed by the vast majority of people coming from full-size keyboards when they try 60% boards, for example. I know the newer trend of exploded 75% layout, such as the ultra-popular GMMK Pro and, more recently, the Keychron Q1, is much more appealing to most keyboard enthusiasts. But there's still something to be said about having all the keys you need on a keyboard that is a tiny bit wider and taller than a 60%. Not for everybody, I know, but if you do have a cramped workspace, every inch of your desk counts. In my particular use cases, I can appreciate this layout to use either as a stationary laptop keyboard, which I have on an arm on the side of my main desktop machine, or for when I'm editing videos or gaming. For the use with laptops, the advantage is that it is small enough to be used on a laptop arm with keyboard support. For my use with video editing, the advantage of size is that it allows me to use other peripherals that are important to my workflow, such as a fully programmable keypad, such as my Razer Tartarus Pro, and a video editing keypad with a jog wheel, such as my Blackmagic Speed Editor. As you can see here, even though I have a fairly sized desk, it can get really cramped when I'm editing videos. So having a small keyboard that still has all the main keys is definitely an advantage here. And lastly, for gaming, I always use a small keyboard anyway, even when I'm using my Razer keypad, simply because it gives me more mouse space and allows my arms and hands to be in a more comfortable position for long sessions. I know this layout is not the most aesthetic thing in the world though. The F row lined up with the numbers row does look a bit weird. And another important concern with keyboards in this layout is keycaps compatibility. These do need a smaller 1.75 units right shift key, as well as an assortment of different profiles for navigation keys such as page up and down, home, insert, and delete. Although, with the growth of this hobby, unless you're buying the cheapest and crappiest keycap sets out there, there's a good chance you'll get at least the basic keys you need for this layout in pretty much any enthusiast level set you buy today. The build quality of the AK84S is overall very good. And the star of the show here, in this full aluminum version, is the case. It is a beautifully cast piece with a sandblasted finish that looks amazing and had no blemishes I could find anywhere. It does not pick up fingerprints and is heavy enough not to move around in your desk. It also sports an unusual mounting system, a hybrid tray mounting one where the PCB hangs from the plate, which is in turn attached to the screw post on the bottom of the case. While not as soft as a gasket mounting mechanism, since the PCB still rests on top of these raised metal shelves on the bottom of the case with no isolation material in between, this is still better than the traditional tray mounting system. It also opens up the possibility for some interesting mods that will be taking a look later. The case sports 4 silicone rounded feet at the bottom that are soft and very grippy. The use of an FR4 plate was the second thing that positively impressed me, since it is inherently softer than steel and aluminium, which are much more common in these types of production keyboards. It is actually pretty rare to see FR4 plates in production boards out there, so this is a big plus in my book. The switches I got on this unit were plain Gateron Reds, which, while might not sound very exciting at this day and age for most enthusiasts, It is still a plus even when compared to more expensive Cherry MX Reds. It is hard to emphasize how much smoother plain Gaterons are when compared to Cherries. But regardless, this is a hot swap keyboard anyway, so you can always replace these with whatever you want down the road. And Epomaker also gives you the option to go with their more premium chocolate switches for the same price, which are supposed to be even smoother than regular Gaterons. But since those have very dark tinted housings, they will basically render the per key RGB useless here. The PCB is the standard affair, with Gateron hot swap sockets, SMD LEDs for per key illumination, soldered in USB-C exiting at the left side, and a JST type connector to the included battery. It has 8 metal standoffs attached to it to secure it to the plate. Oh, and it has integrated Bluetooth 5.1 controller chip as well. It does offer N key rollover in USB plugged-in mode, which is great for gaming, and 6 keys rollover in Bluetooth wireless mode. This keyboard does have per key illumination, and it is fully programmable, which is nice, but it is not very bright, especially when used in wireless mode, as one would expect, since it gets even dimmer to save battery. The board comes with 10 rather basic lighting schemes hardwired that you can access by holding the FN key with the plus or the minus keys. But you can program it to your heart's content through the GK6X Plus standard driver software, as we'll show later. The software used to reprogram this board is, how can I put this, not the best. It works, and it gets the job done, as we'll check out on the software chapter later on, but you have quite a learning curve to use it properly, as you'll see later. Truth is, now they're all spoiled by VIA, this GK driver just doesn't cut it anymore. So I can foresee a lot of people not even bother installing the software for this board and just using the 10 lighting schemes and the 3 layers that comes pre-programmed out of the box. The other thing that might be a plus or a con depending on who you are is the north-facing position of the switches. If you like to use backlit keycaps, you appreciate that, since the larger low-priced keycaps market still has not caught up to this trend of south-facing switches, and still don't offer backlit keycaps with legends on the bottom side of the keys. I honestly don't know what these companies are waiting for. The demand for south-facing backlit keycaps is clearly here. So here, at least, you'll be able to use your pudding keycaps, such as the $35 Loop Pudding Double Shot PBT OEM profile set from Drop I'm showing here, as long as your set has the right keys for a 75% layout, as this one does. Now, if you're an enthusiast that cringes with the possibility of not being able to use cherry profiles on your boards, then the north-facing switches might be a problem to you depending on the switches you use here, since switches with long stem poles, such as most Holy Panda variants out there, are immune to this problem, but others with shorter stem poles might not be. It isn't a problem if you use Epomaker's own GK1 or GK2 profiles though, since they're taller and don't interfere with north-facing switches on the third row, which is a possibility with some combinations of switches and cherry profile sets. On the topic of keycaps, the included set is very good. It is thick BBT, which is always nice, but the legends seem to be some sort of laser etching. A very good laser etching, by the way, since you can't see or feel any raised edges or inconsistencies even when looking at it on a microscope. But the longevity of these legends might be a concern, as most laser etched sets usually are. These caps have center legends, and their alignment is okay. Not stellar, but usable. At least the letters, numbers, and symbols are very sharp and easy to read, even on the black keys, but not so much on the red ones though. The AK84S does not come with any type of case and PCB sound damping foam or silicone, except for 2 small pieces under the spacebar. And this means this board does suffer from case ping in its stock configuration, as we'll hear later in the typing test. So that'll be the first thing we'll have to fix in our modding chapter, of course. And the other thing we'll definitely have to mod are the stabs. Here you have the same type of plate stabs we're used to see on GK boards, which unfortunately means they rattle a lot. Now, to Epomaker's credit, they did factory lube these, which helps a bit, but as is usually the case with these pre-lubed stabs, it is never done well enough to fix the rattling issue. The good news is that these stabs are perfectly usable if you tune them right, as we'll see later. The included switch and keycap pullers are just junk. Do yourself a favor and get good aftermarket ones if you don't already have a decent set that came with another keyboard. I'll leave a few suggestions in the description below. The included cable is thick and the connectors look nice and high quality, but as is usually the case with braided cables that come squeezed like this, they're unruly and difficult to put in the position you want. If you care about keeping your desk looking clean and aesthetically pleasing, you have to get a nicer straight or coiled aftermarket cable. At least the left side placed USB-C connector on this keyboard is recessed and should allow all but the chunkiest cable plugs out there. The Bluetooth controller here can connect simultaneously to up to 3 devices, which you can easily switch by holding the FN plus keys 1, 2, or 3. So this could be super useful in a situation where you have, say, a desktop, a laptop, and a mobile device, such as an iOS or Android phone or tablet, all connected at the same time, and quickly switch between them through these keyboard shortcuts, which is an awesome feature. And the wireless connection here is solid. While my office is small, it has a lot of wireless devices of all sorts that can cause plenty of radio interference. But the AK84S never suffered from any connection hiccup during my time testing it with my desktop computer, which uses a Bluetooth PCIe expansion card, nor with my Windows and macOS laptops. As for latency, I couldn't tell much of a difference when typing. But as we all know by now, Bluetooth is never recommended for keyboards and mice when gaming. That would be a scenario where you will definitely feel the latency in FPS or other types of twitchy games. So, the lack of a 2.4 GHz dongle here will limit the use of this keyboard in wireless mode just to regular desktop work. The battery life on this keyboard is really good. While I don't have a proper battery life standard testing routine for keyboards, I can tell you that depending on your daily use and on your backlight configuration, you can go from anywhere between 3 to 10 days without plugging this keyboard in. The keyboard measures 32 centimeters in width, 13 centimeters in depth, 2.3 centimeters tall on the front side, and 3.1 centimeters in height on the back side. The AK84S doesn't offer adjustable height, so you get a fixed 4 degrees typing angle when measured on top of the third row of its GK1 profile keycaps, which is a mild inclination. I like it. It is a comfortable angle for me. As usual, I use pretty much all my boards with a wrist rest. Here, I'm using the M-Stone Black Crystal in the 65% size that I got from Drop for $27, but is now $42? Oof. Inflation, man. I suggest you get the wood palm rest for the Q1 from Keychron for $32 on Amazon in this case. It's really nice, looks great, and should fit any 75 or 65% keyboard. I'll leave a link for that one below as well. The board weighs around 1.16 kilograms or 2 pounds and 9 ounces. It's a fairly heavy board for its size. As we all know, looks are always subjective, but I really like the AK84S design in this full metal case. While it could have a bit taller profile to hide the switches, it does have very simple lines with smooth curved edges and small bezels that look super clean and classy. There's also no branding in sight, which I love it. Even the bottom side is totally clean. Another kind of Apple-ish trait for this board. You definitely can get something a bit flashier with KBD75 V1 or V2 from KBD fans in terms of color options and RGB, for a similar price when adding switches and keycaps. But the minimalistic design with sandblasted gray of the AK84S is an elegant choice if you don't mind the bare metal finish. On the lighting department, while the RGB here is not super bright, it still gives a nice underglow beneath the keycaps, and can obviously light up shine-through sets, which I know will be a nice pro for some of you out there still frustrated by the GMMK Pro and the Q1 south-facing switches. As for the layout, 75% are an acquired taste. Certainly not for everybody, since there are other layouts much more aesthetically pleasing than this one. But I'd say you could do much worse than the AK84S in that regard for this type of layout. As mentioned before, the AK84S offers the possibility to be used with the infamous standard GK6X Plus driver software, which is the same one for all GK and SK boards. You can configure its RGB backlight, remap keys, create macros, and configure its 3 main layers if you install this application. But as anyone who has ever used this software already knows, there is a rather steep learning curve here. This thing is far from intuitive. And another annoyance with it is that if you have standard security policies on your Windows 7, 8, 10, or 11, you'll always get a notification from the OS asking if you allow this app to make changes to your system. On the good side, you can use this software just to reprogram and reflash your keyboard, and then you can close it and even uninstall it, since your keyboard will keep the changes you make in its 3 programmable layers and to its lighting schemes. Oh, and you can only use this software to reprogram the keyboard when plugged in. This app cannot be used when the keyboard is in Bluetooth mode. The GK6X Plus driver shows 5 different layers in the middle of the app window. Standard, Layer 1, 2, 3, and Driver 1. The standard layer cannot be remapped at all. This layer is here just for the RGB settings. So this is the layer you choose to edit your backlighting options. The layers 1, 2, 3, and driver 1 are the ones you can remap keys. Remapping keys is the easiest part here. First, you select the layer you want to change, then the keys you want to remap on the top, and pick from all the possible functions in the bottom half of the screen. Once you're done, just click Save and Apply to flash your keyboard with the new settings. To create macros, you first select the Macros tab on the top of the app window. Here's where you see some pre-programmed categories and where you can go ahead and create your own. You can then create and name your macros on the main area of the app window. Then you can select the macro name, choose the length of the delay between each key press, and start recording your macro. Once you're done, stop the recording, edit any part of the key sequence you need, and click Save. Now, you can go back to the main Configurations tab and choose the layer you want to save your new macro to. Pick the key you want to assign, choose the category in the bottom right corner, select the macro, then click View, then Save, and then Apply. Then you're ready to start using your new macro. One nice thing here is that you can always go back to the default function at the key you assign a macro to by holding the FN key. To delete a macro, just hover the mouse over the assigned key, click on the trash bin icon, click Save, and then Apply. You also have the option to edit and export your existing macros to configuration files that can be reloaded later, which is always nice. Now, controlling the RGB illumination on the software is where things can get a bit more complicated. As mentioned before, you need to select the standard layer to be able to change this keyboard's backlighting options. And here's where you see 5 memory slots you can use to save lighting configurations on this ribbon in the middle of the app window. To create your scheme, click on the LE Files tab on the top of the window. On the right side column, you can either pick an existing lighting scheme or create your own. Once created and named, you come to the left side of the bottom window where you have to select or create what they call frames. For the sake of this example, let's build a simple static color scheme where I can set everything in a single frame. First, you need to select the frame 0 line and then go ahead and select all the keys you want to edit, which you can pick individual keys, whole lines, or the entire board. Then, on the bottom middle part of the app window, you click on a line, leave it as monochrome for a static color, pick the color, then you select which keys you want to apply that color to within the selected frame. To add an RGB rainbow color scheme to a key, you create a line with the RGB option in it, set how many colors you want to rotate through in the parameter window, I left it as 30 in this case, and then select which keys you want to apply it to. Then you keep repeating this process until you edit all the keys. To see a preview of the lighting scheme, just click the play button on the bottom of the window. Once all keys are configured, just click Save, go back to the Configurations tab, select the standard layer, choose the light scheme memory slot you want to change, click on the 3 dots menu, and pick your newly created light scheme. Then, click Save and Apply. If you want a more in-depth guide on how to use the GK6X Plus driver to remap keys, create and assign macros and RGB schemes, I'll leave a link below to a series of videos by Ken Solo that are very good to get you started. Alright, let's see how this keyboard sounds in its stock form. Well, let's face it, it sounds like a Pingy and Bradley mess, but don't worry, we'll fix that. And how does it feel to type on? The switches feel decently smooth, thanks to the always nice plain Gateron Reds, but the bottom out feels a bit on the stiff side, to a point where you can feel the vibration on your desk and in your fingertips when typing, which, again, is something we'll try to fix in this keyboard's design. So, now it's time to mod this bad boy. But before we do, a disclaimer. As a production keyboard, modding it in any way might void Epomaker's 1-year limited warranty. While you might get away with lubing switches, adding some damping material to the case, and even relube stabs, any destructive mods you make to it, such as cutting the legs out of the stab stems or cutting the screw posts of the case, as we'll do here, will void your warranty. So you might want to wait a bit before you do any of such irreversible mods to this keyboard. The first thing to mod here was, of course, lube the switches with my mix of 50/50 Krytox 205 grade 2 grease and 105 oil. Moving on to the aluminum case. Here, after analyzing the mounting system and the number of screw posts that attach to the plate, I decided to cut off 4 of them in the middle of the case to see if I could soften up the typing experience a little bit. So off we go to removing all the 19 screws that attach the plate to the case and the PCB. There are long screws to attach the plate to the case and short screws to attach it to the metal spacers on the PCB. Let's just say that you really want a wow stick for this job. Link for it on the description below as usual. Next, I protected the area around the screw posts I wanted to cut and the battery with some masking tape, set up the cutting disc on my Dremel 3000 rotary tool, put some eye protection, always use eye protection when using rotary tools, and then moved on to cut those posts. After cleaning everything up, I moved up to add a case damping silicone layer. For sound damping, I went with a 1.5mm sheet of silicone baking mat, which is my favorite material to damp the sound of tight areas within keyboard cases, as the space for damping material here was really tight. Anything thicker than this would touch the PCB and remove any space underneath it. There is a deeper area in the middle of the case, which I marked its dimensions with a Sharpie and then cut the mat with a box cutter. Then, I poked holes where the remaining screw posts would go and finished it off with scissors, including a hole for the battery cable to go through. To add a bit more space between the PCB and the case, I also placed some 8mm silicone O-rings, the same type we use to silence MX switches, around the screw posts at the edges inside the case, since the PCB sits on top of these shelves. The idea here is to sit the PCB on top of the O-rings to give it another millimeter or so between it and the shelf to completely isolate the PCB from any friction with the metal and give it a bit more flexibility. The stabilizers of the AK84S already came with a bit of dielectric grease between the wires and the stems, but here I decided to clean the excess grease off to properly lube all the parts. First, I removed them from the plate, separated the parts, clipped the flexible legs on the stem with a flush cutter, and then lubed the inner surfaces of the housings and all sides of the stems with my Krytox mix. Then, I decided to apply an even thicker type of grease than the usual Permatex, the now famous XHT BDZ grease, one of the thickest variants of Krytox in the market. This is not a cheap product at the $37.59 plus taxes that I paid for a 14-gram syringe, but I figured these Radley stabs could use the additional viscosity. Besides, unlike dielectric grease, XHT BDZ will last much longer without requiring frequent touch-ups, so it is worth it in the long run. Before reinstalling the stabs into the plate, I also applied silicone adhesives to the area of the PCB where the stems hit when bottoming out, which works really well to silence stabs' loud clacks, and strips of thick electric tape on the bottom edge of the cutouts to ensure the housings don't wiggle around. And finally, I did the Tempest Tape mod by applying a layer of masking tape, ensuring the controller chips and battery cable plug were not covered. As we all know by now, pretty much any production board will benefit from this mod, since it will lower the overall pitch and give a more pleasant thwacky sound. After putting the whole keyboard back together, I also tried Epomaker's $65 silicone GK2 Keycaps set. A very interesting option to change the look, feel, and sound of a keyboard. These caps have an inner ABS frame with a silicone sleeve on top, where the legends are cast with the same material in a different color. And because silicone is a powerful sound damper, these caps will lower the pitch and the volume of sound coming out of the keyboard, giving it a nice low frequency smooth tone to it. These caps also have a nice grip on the fingertips, and I suspect they might last a long time. certainly longer than those tie-how textured gaming keycaps that were more prone to show signs of aging after a few months of heavy use. And now, take a listen to the sound test of the AK84S with the silicone and O-ring dampers modded case, lubed Gateron Reds, clipped, silenced and XHT BDZ tuned stabs, and taped PCB with the stock PBT, the PBT loop pudding, and the silicone GK2 keycaps. Oh boy, did these mods pay off. Now we have a much cleaner and lower overall tone, no case ping, and zero stabs rattling. The lube switches are more buttery smooth than ever, and the added isolation and flexibility to the plate and PCB assembly completely removed any trace of rattles and vibrations. With both the stock and the pudding PBT caps, the bottom out was very crisp and clean, and with the silicone caps the overall sound was a bit muffled, as you'd expect, but also with a much lower and more pleasant frequency, making it the perfect choice for use in an open office environment, for example. When compared to the stock configuration, the modded keyboard sound volume was reduced by 2.3 dB on the stock PBT set, didn't change on the thinner PBT loop pudding, and was reduced by 4 dB on the silicone GK2 set. So, what are my conclusions about the Epomaker AK84S after about a couple of months of use and all my mods? In stock form, the AK84S outfitted with Gateron Red linear switches and stock PBT caps felt okay, but didn't sound too good in my opinion. The excessive stiffness of the plate and PCB assembly, plus the poorly tuned stabs, generated too much vibration and rattling. The spacebar noise was particularly distracting. Besides, the full aluminium case with no sound damping exacerbated the ping from the stock switches, with an overall metal ringing that can get annoying pretty quickly. So, modding this keyboard is a must to get the most out of it. I'd say that at least tuning its stabs and adding some sound damping is the minimum you should do before daily driving it. At any rate, the combination of mods I did here really transformed this keyboard. It sounds like a completely different keyboard now. The sound is now much cleaner and has a lower pitch, even with the stock PBT keycaps, and even more so with the silicone ones. The case ringing and stabs rattling are completely gone, and the silicone O-rings PCB isolation and the slight bit of plate flex that resulted not only helped with the sound, but also made the keyboard much nicer to type on, by absorbing more of the vibrations caused by the typing force. These mods make this keyboard sound like a much more expensive custom board. As for the overall quality of manufacturing materials used here, I think you're getting a fair deal for $200. Sure, it would be nice if it didn't require any mods to feel and sound good, but then again, you're not going to find many production boards at this price range that don't require mods out of the box anyway. The quality of the aluminum case is top-notch. My copy arrived without any blemishes on the metal case. The modified tray mount design, while not as nice as a gasket mounting system, is still better than plain tray mount designs of cheaper boards. If for nothing else, because this gives us more interesting modding possibilities as I did here. The out-of-box compatibility with both Windows and Mac OS, with the inclusion of the additional keycaps, are also very much welcome. Definitely something I'd like to see more manufacturers doing. The quality of the FR4 plate, the PCB thickness and components, the reliability of the Bluetooth connection, the sharpness of the legends and thickness of the stock PBT keycaps are all excellent for the price. As for the cons, my main gripe with this keyboard is the GK6X Plus driver, which is now way too long in the tooth. Epomaker and Skylong should move their future products to the world of QMK and VIA compatibility. While I get it that this keyboard was designed way back in 2020, I'd say that VIA is a must for any keyboard from this point forward. Another minor gripe is the relatively dim backlighting, even when using it wired. Not a huge deal to me, but it might be to you. But the fact that this keyboard is relatively easy to mod, tune, and fix makes up for most of these cons. And the fact that you have some sort of warranty from the manufacturer, for as limited as it might be, is still an advantage, of course, which is something I always like to emphasize since most custom keyboard kits out there usually don't give you that assurance. One big advantage of buying from Epomaker is availability. Most of the keyboards they sell on their website ship relatively quick, and they are very good in keeping most models in stock and at restocking them whenever they sell out. As for pricing, as I mentioned before, I think this premium version of the AK84S is a fair deal for $200. The quality of the case alone might justify the $90 extra on top of the cheaper plastic case bottom. But as far as comparing the value of the AK84S with the competition, I'd say that the $109 version is certainly very competitive for the quality and design of the overall package, especially considering the addition of a good Bluetooth 5.1 controller. But for this full aluminium premium version of the AK84S, the value discussion does change a bit. I know that at this point, any keyboard that costs over $170 will immediately be compared with the 800-pound gorillas in the semi-custom market, the GMMK Pro and the Keychron Q1. But at least in the case of the GMMK Pro, it is important to remind that you don't get switches and keycaps for its $170. So in that sense, I think the Q1 is better positioned to compete with the AK84S, since you can get it with switches and keycaps for about the same price when adding Keychron's shipping costs. But with both the GMMK Pro and the Q1, you don't get wireless connectivity, which I think is the main differentiator here for the AK84S. And for those who want a cheaper and larger exploded 75%, but want to keep the wireless connectivity and the north-facing switches, iQnix has the awesome A80 and L80 that I'll be reviewing here in the channel soon, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it. Those are very high quality plastic keyboards that will cost a bit less than the AK84S and even come with a 2.4 GHz dongle. That is an extra advantage if you want to use them for gaming in wireless mode. So, who is the premium version of the AK84S good for? In my opinion, it is suited for anyone who needs an aesthetically pleasing mechanical keyboard in a compact size, built with premium materials, and has the need for wireless connectivity. And because it has hot swap sockets, it would also be recommended to anyone who's not afraid to venture into the endless world of premium aftermarket switches or to get their hands dirty with some DIY mod action. In other words, people straddling the lines between a normie mechanical keyboard user and an aspiring enthusiast, depending on their use case. If you want a sharp-looking wireless board that will look good in your desk with your fancy iMac or MacBook, for example, this will be perfect, since it is a full-blown mechanical keyboard that will be way better to type on than any laptop-style keyboard will ever be. But considering how much better this keyboard can get if you're not afraid to lube switches and mod stabs, keyboard tinkerers in general will extract much more value from this board than the average user. In my keyboard market segments chart, this board fits very well in the base of the premium category of the large-scale production segment, but can be pushed higher in terms of typing feel and sound if you mod it as I did here. For everybody else who don't care about premium looks and materials or advanced programmability and just want a decent compact 75% hot swap keyboard that will not break the bank, you will obviously have plenty of other options out there around the $100 mark, including the regular version of the AK84S itself for $110. And this is that time when I'll ask you for that generous like and even to subscribe if you enjoyed this video and want to see more of these. As usual, if you want to check out any of the products and tools mentioned throughout the video, there are links for everything in the description below. And if you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll be glad to help. If you haven't seen my previous review and modding guide of the most popular 75% keyboard in the market since last year, check it out right here. Or click here to see how it behaves with aftermarket polycarbonate and FR4 plates and with tape and PE foam mods. Thank you again, and see you all soon.